So Borough's pre-season has concluded with a 2-2 draw at home to Deportivo La Corun. Guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be taking a little look at Borough's final pre-season friendly at home to Deportivo La Corun, as well as just give a sort of brief review of Borough's overall pre-season as it is now all done and dusted. Borough haven't come out of pre-season with a win as yet. There's been a ton of draws in there. Of course, we drew to Mansfield 3-3, drew to Deportivo La Corun today. We drew at Rangers. The Hartlepool game was completely unrelated, although we drew that as well. And of course, lost to Bradford as well. But as for this final friendly, it gave us a good idea of what Borough's starting 11 could look like going into next week's opener against Swansea. There were things that I think were positives to take, but there were also glaring issues that, well, I guess we've known of for a long time now and just continue to be even more apparent as the weeks go by. So let's just first off talk about the game against Deportivo. It was a decent-ish game. I would say the second half was definitely better than the first. The first half was a very scrappy, bitty affair. Neither side could really get into their flow. There was a lot of fouls, a lot of stoppages. It wasn't a great game of football, but I don't think Borough did all that well in the first half anyway. This is how we started the game, so this will give you a good idea on what we're I think leaning towards going into next week. I do think if bodies come in between now and next weekend, they've got to go into the team, straight into the team in some areas at least. Solbrin was the goalkeeper, which might give you the best indication of what or who Rob Edwards' number one is going to be between the sticks. He did play the entire 90 minutes today, which I'm glad about because I definitely prefer him over Tom Glover. As for the back three, shock, Darragh Lenihan is out injured. He's on the treatment table, as well as Rav Vandenberg, who might even be off anyway. George Edmondson is also on the treatment table, who I saw at the game, who looks like he's had a suspicious hair transplant. You be the judge of that. So we had probably our only three fit centre-halves on the pitch to start. Alfie Jones was at the right of a back three with Fry in the middle, Borges on the left, and then the same wing-backs that we've started in most of the games so far. Luke Ayling was on the right, Sammy Silvera was on the left. Hayden Hackney was back today. Of course, he rejected the chance to go to Ipswich and was straight back in and on Borough's bench. He was not, of course, in the starting 11, with Law McCabe keeping his place from the Rangers game a week ago alongside Aidan Morris. The two tens in behind Conway were Bergzorg on the left and Morgan Whittaker on the right. Now, we actually started the game really well. 4 minutes in, Borough took the lead. And what I will say is, of the 2 goals Borough scored today, there were massive positives with both. Firstly, the first one, it was the aggressive high press that we know Rob Edwards wants to implement. That come in very, very effectively here. It was Luke Ayling, I believe, who won the ball high up the pitch. So it's great to see that that instruction is working. We're seeing it on the pitch. But it also not only won us possession, it helped us create a goal. A good one too, I think it was between him and Morgan Whittaker. Allowed Ayling to cut the ball back for Tommy Conway, who had an empty net to tap the ball into. Now, this is a really good sign for Borough. A lot of things that Rob Edwards wants to do are working here. We know his wing-backs have to be very, very involved and very, very creative. And although I think Luke Ayling's been nowhere near as much of a threat as what we would have liked to have seen him be in pre-season, he's nowhere near as much of a threat down the right as I think a Rob Edwards wing-back needs to be. And I don't think he will be starting there at all if our summer business is to go to plan. It was good at least to see, I guess, positionally, Borough's wing-backs pushing up, winning the ball, turning it over really hard up the pitch, and then being involved in the creation of a goal. And it's really good as well to see our number 9, Tommy Conway, getting on the end of these moves, being in the right place at the right time. He did allude to after the game that unlike when Carrick was here, when he was having to literally run the channels, he was sometimes drifting out left, right, drifting out wide just to get involved. It seems like he's very much been told by Rob Edwards to stay central, stay between the width of the box, and just be in the right place at the right time. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this from Tommy Conway this season. You know, wing-backs getting to the byline, putting balls in, cutting the ball back. He's got to be in the box, in the right place, at the right time with a poacher's finish. He did that twice today. So 2 real positives with Tommy Conway and the fact that both goals were created by our wing-backs. However, other than that, in the first half, not much else from Borough, really. We did concede after 11 minutes. You can't do much about the finish, I'm going to be honest. It was an outstanding curled finish into the top bin. However, he was given way much time to cut back onto his right foot and get the shot away. And that's the one thing I would say about Borough's wing-backs. They might offer a lot going forward, but they have been susceptible at the back. I think it was Silvera who lost the ball on the opposite side, which gave Deportivo the possession to then switch it. And then off the left, they cut in off the right-hand side. Should have been shot down the line. And he bent one beautifully into the corner. So a very good goal, but definitely one that was avoidable. And then for the rest of the half, as I say, not much happened really. It was a very bitty game, a very stop-start game. I don't think Rob Edwards was impressed, particularly with, I guess, the intensity of Borough's play. We were a bit slow, a bit lethargic. There wasn't much movement off the ball. The connection from back to front wasn't quite there in the first half. You know, the two tens were not really getting into the game at all. You know, the midfielders weren't driving forward. They were passing the ball sideways. We were going out wide quite a lot, then coming back inside. And because the 10s weren't exactly getting involved in the game, that left Tommy Conway quite an isolated figure for a lot of the first half. So that really didn't help, although the goal we scored was good. We weren't as much of a threat as we have been in previous friendlies. However, the second half was better. We did seem to have a little bit more impetus about our play. We did seem to be mixing it up a little bit more. The 10s and Tommy Conway were dropping in, getting involved a bit more, and we did create a couple of decent opportunities. We did go behind, though. I didn't quite see this goal from where I was sat, but it was from a corner, which will be disappointing from a Borough point of view, missing out on the first contact. And, of course, Bryn did get a hand to it, I believe, but couldn't quite keep it out. So that was a real shame to see us concede from a set piece, but we did get ourselves back into the game second half, and as I alluded to in the first, it was fantastic to see it come from our wing backs. And as much as I am saying this with a lot, and I mean a lot of caution, because we thought this 2 seasons ago with this player, and he's been far from convincing ever since then, Sammy Silvera, once again, and you've got to give credit where it's due, regardless of if you're a fan of him, if you're a skeptic or what, you've got to give credit where it's due. Sammy Silvera was probably, once again, as he has been for a lot of pre-season, one of our best and most effective attacking players. He was great down the left today. He really, really was. He was taking his man on, beating his man, getting to the byline, putting some really good balls into the box, and looked overall just a real threat from the left-hand side. And I think even though, yes, we want better in that position, we should absolutely look for more in that position. If you want a player to come back, get his head down, and prove to the manager that he has a place in this team, whether we like it or we don't, Sammy Silvera has probably been one of the biggest winners of pre-season, and his run here was brilliant. I think he beat 2, 3, 4 players maybe in his mazy run down the left, but not only did he do that, he then had the composure to cut the ball back into a dangerous area. Who was there once again? Tommy Conway, in the right place at the right time to tap home once more for his second of the game, which levelled it up. And that's pretty much how it finished. There were a couple of other good opportunities. I would say Borough edged the game and had the better of the other really big goal-scoring opportunities. You know, I wouldn't say Deportivo threatened Bryn all that much. You know, they scored from a corner out of the blue and curled one into the top corner. So I wouldn't say we were wide open. I wouldn't say we were poor defensively. I think they just took their chances really well. Borough maybe should have done more. Maybe should have won the game. Bergzorg missed a really, really easy opportunity. He went with his head when he should have probably brought the ball down and had a free shot at goal. You know, there were a couple of really good cutbacks and crosses, which we couldn't quite get on the end of. So, yeah, overall, it wasn't the best game. There's still a lot of stuff that Borough need to improve on. And I think going forward, we definitely need to do better. We need to be a little bit more versatile. I think we need to be mixed up a little bit more, and we need to get more out of our 10s and probably our midfield too as well. But in terms of seeing our wing-backs being effective, getting involved, getting assists, and our number 9 getting the ball in the back of the net, in the right position, positives in that position. What wasn't a positive, I guess, again, is the squad depth that Borough have. Once more, we know this. We've spoken about this a lot. The team that Borough finished with wasn't ideal. You know, we had to just we're plugging so many gaps, square pegs in round holes at the moment. It's insane. We had to bring on George McCormick as a left wing back, who I don't quite think's ready for the Championship. That meant Luke Ayling had to go back into right centre half, which I think is probably his better position. But that meant Sammy Silvera was at right wing back, which, we've got no depth there at all. So that's an issue. It was nice, though, to see Borough be able to switch both midfielders and have a bit of depth there, even though Hackney, I still think, will be off. It was great to see him back on the pitch. He come on, as did our new signing, Abdoulaye Kante, for McCabe and Morris. So it was good to see them two in midfield. Kante looked bright. He looked nippy. He looked good. He committed a few fouls, but, there were so many fouls in this game, it was untrue. I thought he looked decent. I thought he looked okay, did Abdoulaye Kante. But then up front, again, Marcus Forss was brought on, sort of shoehorned into one of the number 10 positions. I don't remember him even touching the ball, to be honest with you. And then the only player we could bring on in place of Tony Conway was Sonny Finch, who I think is a good young player, but isn't the sort of player you want to be relying on as a backup for your number 9. So, again, the starting 11 wasn't awful. We have to, of course, replace the wing-backs. There's enough links at the minute for me to suggest that we're going to be fine there. Callum Britton on the right. We've been linked with a wing-back from Columbus Crew to go on the left. So I think in terms of them positions, I think we will get them right. We simply have to. And then, of course, you're looking around midfield. It depends on if Hackney stays or not and if we replace him. The centre-backs are becoming an issue, though. We've got 3 on the treatment table already. I've already talked in the pre-season about my concern with Borough's centre-halves and how unreliable they are to stay fit. We're seeing proof of that already with Lenihan out again. Rav out, might be leaving anyway. Edmondson has vanished off the face of the planet and might have been away getting a hair transplant. Again, I don't know, you tell me. And then in the attacking areas, again, if it wasn't for the injuries, it probably wouldn't be so bad. If we had Azaz fit, if we had McGree fit, you wouldn't need Bergzorg in them positions. He probably wouldn't even be in the team at all, but we have to have him there because of the injuries again. Same with the depth behind Conway. There just isn't the depth there at all. So the concerns for me, I guess, aren't in the performances. It's not in anything Rob Edwards is trying to do. The biggest concern for me is the lack of depth in the squad, which we've spoke about. And I think one that's just starting to maybe grow a little bit more for me are the injuries. That's a concern I've had for a while. But it is starting to probably become my number 1 concern right now, because it doesn't matter how good the players are that we bring in. If they can't play and they're not fit, it doesn't matter, does it, at the end of the day? And already, this was an injury-riddled team last season. The worry was going into this season with Rob Edwards, he plays a more aggressive, more demanding style of football, especially off the ball. The injuries would only be aggravated and made worse. And that's kind of what's happened. Already this summer, Bangura injured, Lenihan injured, Rav's been injured, Edmondson's been injured, Azaz, we've not seen him at all. Hackney, we don't know if that was legit or if it was just down to transfer speculation. McGree, there's so many players that have already dropped through injury, and if we continue to have this same problem as we have the last couple of seasons, it's going to really cripple us, because if all them players are in the 11, I don't think it looks that bad. Again, it's just the wing-backs. If the wing-backs can get in, we might be all right. But the injuries and the lack of depth in this Borough team right now continues to be a huge concern. And there is a lot of work to do between now and the end of the window. There really, really is. The amount of business and work that needs doing, the amount of gaps that still remain in this Borough team. And I think just the worry with the injuries, it's still a huge concern. And I think it's safe to say, although I do see things improving. I do see things getting better. Obviously, today, as I say, great to see Tommy Conway get 2 and both goals come from the wing-backs. There are certainly little positive things that we're seeing come through, but Borough have still, I think, yet to have a clean sheet in pre-season. We still conceded 3 at Mansfield, 2 at Rangers, 2 at Bradford, 2 here. We have to stop conceding goals, and we have to hope that we can muster a squad from somewhere and do enough business between now and the end of the window that will allow us to, rely on players who can stay fit. And if they do get injured, the depth is there to step in, because all it's taking at the minute are a few players to drop, and then we're having to shoehorn so many players into areas where they're out of position. It's really, really not ideal at all. So, yeah, overall, as a pre-season, it's been okay. I guess, again, I sit back and look at the whole thing in hindsight, and I think Borough have just gave themselves a much bigger task than they needed to this pre-season. You know, sacking Michael Carrick remains, for me, the right decision. But if it's believed that we were always going to recruit for a 4, you know, the message coming out of the club has been, we recruit for a 4, the continuity from one manager to the next will always be there. The players that we sign them for Middlesbrough Football Club. The style is to fit Middlesbrough Football Club. The manager even is to fit Middlesbrough Football Club. I am just getting a little bit worried that we've maybe made the same mistake that we've made so often in the Championship, and it's probably the biggest reason as to why we've been stuck here for so long. Every time we change manager, we're having to bounce from one style to another. The players that we had before do not fit the system that we now have to play under a new manager, and a lot of the players we had here before then have to be moved on. The turnover of players then keeps getting bigger and bigger, and you just can't build anything when you're doing that, and you're having to change things so massively every time a new manager comes in. You know, I look like teams like Coventry and Millwall and many others who have an identity and a way of playing regardless of the manager. Just having that continuity allows them to build so much better squads. Borough just feel like they always have to take 2 steps forward and then 2 steps back every single season, and I am just a little bit worried that, again, it's nothing against Rob Edwards and his ability. It's just his style of football. It's such a shift from what we had before. I just worry it's, 1, going to give us too many injuries. 2, I don't know how many of our players can actually play it. I don't know how many of our players would be able to play it. You know, how many of these players, the Bergzorgs, the Marcus Forces, are we either going to have to shoehorn in or are just not going to play a part? They're not going to be effective, so why have them here? Is it going to lead to us having a lot of dead wood and a lot of players who've been recruited to play a certain way, only for us to now play a different way and them now be completely, you know, irrelevant and they just don't fit? You know, you look at the bench today, Barlasser didn't get a kick, Gilbert, Hamilton, none of them got a kick. So you've either got to get rid of these players and replace them and get rid of the dead wood, because they are propping up the wage bill, to which that needs to come down as well. I just feel like there's just so much change and so much difference, and there just doesn't need to be. And it's nothing against Edwards and his ability, but I just wish there was a little bit more continuity from one manager to the other, because it feels like we always have to constantly, when we change a manager, reset, rebuild, start from scratch. And at the minute, I wouldn't say it's as much of a drastic change as other managers, but it is feeling at the minute like we're trying to make what we did well before work in this system. We're trying to force a lot of the players that we had before in this system, and I'm just not sure how much of it will work and how much of it won't. I really hope it does, and I hope we can bring in the players that will fit his system, who'll stay fit, and we will be okay. But there still remains a lot of deadwood in this team who are being shoehorned in that simply don't fit. And I just worry that lack of continuity, that lack of being able to build a squad over the years, it's just going to put us back to square one, and we're going to go back and take a step back this season to then maybe start taking steps forward again. But that's the cycle we've been in for a decade now. So there's a couple of concerns like that that just make me wonder, you know, is the continuity from Carrick ball to Edwards ball going to be there, or is the shift and all the change just going to be too much? Time will tell. But anyway, that's sort of my overall thoughts on pre-season and Borough as a whole. Lots to come in the next week, of course, as we build up to the opening game against Swansea next weekend. I will be back, of course. The Project Borough previews will be back next week as we look ahead to the Swansea game. If you're new, the preview shows, we basically look at the opposition, we look at Borough, we try and predict the team and predict the result as well. Chris will be back on the channel next week. He'll be joining me. We'll be doing a bumper Project Borough podcast previewing the season and giving our overall predictions of not just the start of the season, but hopefully the season as a whole as well as loads of other content on the channel. So subscribe for all that good stuff. Thank you all for your support. The subscriber count, the views, the channel has never been on fire as much as it is right now. It really has gone into another gear the last couple of weeks and months. So thank you all for your support. Thank you everyone who's jumped on board. Like the video if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for more. Hit the bell too so you never miss when a video drops. And leave me a comment below with your thoughts on this game and pre-season. And until next time, guys, do take care. And I'll see you all in the next one.